coming out. I want to thank Flagler College. I want to thank the Student Government Organization. And I want to thank everybody that worked, the faculty, etc., to get us here tonight, because this is fun. We've never done this before on campus. My name is Joe Boles. I'm the mayor of St. Augustine. I have been for 8 years. I was a city commissioner before that for 2 years. Before that, I was on planning and zoning, determining how our city could be laid out in a systematic fashion for the good of everyone. I've been here for 47 years and had a business here for 34 years. I have graduates from Flagler College. My stepdaughter right there graduated from Flagler College. My brother graduated here. When Flagler College was being built, I was a junior in high school. And so I saw what it has done for our city. And I still have a mother that lives here too, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Boles. And Ms. Shaver.
It's working, right? Okay. Hi, I'm Nancy Shaver, and I'm running for mayor. And when I came here, I was thinking about tonight, I was thinking about myself when I was in college. And realizing the kind of political activism that I was involved with because it was the 60s. So very much involved in politics, and I'm delighted to see all of you here. I think it's a tribute to democracy, and the reason I'm running is because democracy matters. And I'm running on a platform of transparency, much more involvement, so I hope to see many of you at commission meetings, and you will have agendas, you will have information, you will have the ability to weigh in, and we'll work together to solve problems. I want to leave you with some words from Thomas Jefferson, because when I've never run for political office before. I was president of student government in high school, so I guess that counts. In fact, I'm sure it counts. But what Thomas Jefferson said when I thought about running, Thomas Jefferson was very clear that public service was public service, that you left your farm and you went to serve the public, and you went back to your farm, that it was not an inherited position. Remember, we're a democracy. And what he said is what inspired me, really. It was the last thing I read that really is why I'm standing here. He said, if you are able to serve and you are capable and you leave that service to those less capable, you open the door to corruption. Now, I don't mean corruption literally, but something that works less well. So I've been a student of this city for 4 years and know I can make a difference, and hope you will be engaged, and I hope you will trust me with your vote.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Now we'd like to start with our first question, and we will begin with the mayor. And you both touched on this, but we'll have you elaborate just if you could. How long have you lived here is the question, and how has St. Augustine impacted your life?
Sure, and for the filming, do you want us to remain seated or standing?
Whatever is comfortable, I think is fine. You can sit.
I prefer standing.
Yeah, let's just, okay. You may stand.
Like I say, 47 years ago, St. Augustine is not what it is now. It was still a beautiful city, and it was still the nation's oldest city. No one can take that from us. We'll always be known for that. How it's affected my life is that when I was here, there was very little opportunity for people graduating from high school. We had to leave to go to college. We either went to junior college or we went to state college. I went to the University of Florida. If there had been a Flagler College here, I'd have probably stayed, because I spent my weekends here. I mean, I was a surfer. I came back every weekend. Tried to get one semester to Tuesdays and Thursday classes only so I could spend 4 days here. Worked pretty well, but I did awful. I think the first job that I had has affected me greatly. I dressed up like Ponce de Leon and rode a horse up and down St. George Street, 16 years old. And all of a sudden told me I was in a special place. St. Augustine is a special place. So after I got out of college, after I got out of law school, this is the only place I wanted to come. People will work their entire lives. You'll see them all over town to retire and come and live in St. Augustine. And the reason is because this is where we all want to be. They probably visited once and said, that's where we're going. They probably traveled around the state and said, that's the best place. And since I already had family and friends, this is where I wanted to come to build the rest of my life. So I've been here the whole time since I graduated. I've been blessed. I have a great law practice. I'm an elder lawyer, do business law. don't chase ambulances, but that's a noble part of the practice sometimes too. But this is what St. Augustine has given to me, a sense of place, a sense of self, and the relationships that I've been able to build over the last 34 years as a business operator and a resident, and as a man that's raised his family here, is second to none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Yates?
I came to St. Augustine 5 years ago, and I came here with my late husband, and we knew it was going to be his last winter, and we were in the north, and we said, not going to spend it here, and drew a circle around a number of places, and then a friend of ours said, you'll like St. Augustine. We had never been here. He was a sailor and a carpenter, and it seemed like a really good place to come. So we bought the house that I now live in Lincolnville, sight unseen, and it was an incredibly rich period in our lives. And what I know about St. Augustine is not just the natural beauty and not just the buildings, the history, everything that intoxicates you. It's one of the places people walk down the street and don't look at their cell phones. But what I know about it is that it is a place of people. It is a place of community that welcomes. It is a warm, caring place. And it's a place that instantly became home for us. My dad was in the Navy, so I didn't really have a hometown. And I traveled a lot in my business life and lived in different places. So for me, St. Augustine is a touchstone, and it's a wonderful place to be. We love it. It's magical. And the reason that I actually am standing here is that I want to keep that magic.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. And Mayor Boles, you actually have a rebuttal on this question.
A rebuttal? Well, I won't stand for this because it's 30 seconds. And you know, this is a magical place. But it didn't get that way without a lot of hard work by a lot of good people. And I'm glad when she came here 4 or 5 years ago, she thought it was a magical place, because I've been working hard for 4 or 5 years, 6 years already at that time. And I think we have created a ton of relationships and partnerships throughout this city, because everybody has to have a seat at this table. Residents, visitors, business, institutions. It doesn't work unless everybody's at the table. So,
thank you, Ms. Boles. Now, the second question starts with Ms. Shaver, and the question is, what is your stance on the expansion of Flagler College?
This is a complicated question. I know all of you are in the audience. So let's talk about what Flagler contributes to this community. It is incredible to be in a college town. Everything that you do in terms of lectures, in terms of things we can enjoy, and quite frankly, watching all of you on the streets is just great entertainment. But it's a beautiful place, and it's a big part of the heart of what makes St. Augustine. The question you asked is, what about the expansion of Flagler College? One of the things that all of you in the audience need to understand is that this is a very tiny city. It only has about 13 square miles, depending upon what you're counting. And in terms of the tax base, when you look at it from the perspective of how do you keep the city magic and run it, 40% of the footprint of real estate in the city is nonprofit. So that means you have a limited tax base. So as Flagler expands, and Flagler owns right now $113 million worth of property, and has, if I'm remembering correctly, 7 or 8 parcels that are currently commercial or rented, that are paying taxes, that could become the things that we know are on the bucket list for you guys, which is a science center, a dormitory, and a parking garage. So the question is always balance. How do you make certain that what you are doing, because we're all part of this, as Joe said, we're all here, we all have a seat at the table, they're residents, they're businesses, so what is the right way to make sure that balance exists and continues to exist? Do I have a position on it? Each part of expansion will come before the commission, will come before the planning and zoning, and balance is a very important part of any kind of expansion. One of the things that I'm looking forward to are discussions with Flagler about, I think you've probably heard of payments in lieu of taxes. There are some additional contributions universities often make, but it's a complicated question. Balance is the answer.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Mayor Boles?
sure. Well, if Flagler College came to us today and said, we're going to bring $1 billion economic impact to your city, we'd probably say, great, we'll give you some money, we'll help you, we'll do anything we can to make it happen. That's what they brought since 1967. Flagler is going to expand, and Flagler is going to work with the community on that expansion, and that's one of our top goals. But if you're going to invite and welcome and bring a college into your community, you have to make some accommodations. The new Pollard Hall, do I think that building's probably too big for that lot? Yeah, it probably is. But that's one of the accommodations you make to have a college in your city. You can't have it like as if they weren't here and pretend like they aren't and have it all your way. That's why everybody has to be at the table. When she mentions payment in lieu of taxes, I'm opposed to that. On July 15th, she rolled that out. And then she said it again on October 2nd. You look on Mary Baer's YouTube, you can see it. She has a number picked out for Flagler College, and that's $1 million. I don't think that's appropriate. And everybody that will tell you that you asked that's got any knowledge of how that works will tell you can't assess a fee on one nonprofit without making it uniform across the board. Now, I've heard that she thinks it's voluntary now. She didn't say voluntary then, but she said voluntary now. I don't know if Flagler College is going to volunteer to pay $1 million every year. And if they do, we still can't plan it for our budget. To plan a budget for a city, you have to have committed, dedicated money that you know you're going to collect. Voluntary payments don't work. These pilots, as they're called, are not as common as she says. Only 107 have been tried in the last since 2000. So, thank you very much.
Mary Baer. Ms. Shaver?
The wonderful thing about hearing from a lawyer is that sometimes they don't read the law. The pilot program is well established. It is absolutely not true that every nonprofit across the board would be assessed. It is a voluntary, negotiated activity that brings benefit to both the university and to the town. It is a fair sharing arrangement. It's a discussion, and it's something that I will absolutely bring to the table. The other thing about being a lawyer is sometimes you get the numbers wrong, so the number is not $1 million. So it's clearly a flashpoint here, but definitely.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Okay. The next question, Mayor Boles, what do you intend to implement in order to decrease traffic?
Well, first let's talk about traffic, because there are a dozen cities nearby that wish they had our traffic. Bunnell, Palatka, they wish they had our traffic. Traffic is economic development. Traffic during the week is people going to work and taking their kids to school. Traffic during the weekend are people coming here and spending the $766 million that tourists spend in St. Johns County. And we make money off that, and that keeps your taxes low. So when we look at traffic and get upset about being in line at the bridge, I just remember that when I was 16, there was traffic on the bridge. Now what do we do about that? Well, number one, we got to get people out of their cars. So you can't talk about traffic without talking about parking. Where are they going to go? Satellite parking is part of the solution. Public-private partnerships for parking areas, surface parking, is another solution. And then there are private enterprises. I know one man that's getting ready to do a satellite parking area right now. And not everybody needs to ride from the beach through St. Augustine to go home. So signage, once approved, allows us to direct people out 312 and around. Everybody at the beach doesn't have to ride through town. We know it's beautiful, but it just clogs the traffic on the weekend. Now, we have built relationships with the Department of Transportation because every road in the city that matters is controlled by the state of Florida. We can't pave one pothole without their permission. But we can work with them on additional times for the bridge to stay closed, add to it during the week, and for the first time they've considered adding curfew times on the weekends, so that morning, noon, and evening on the weekend. Never been tried before, and we hope they'll let us do it. But you know, it takes forever gathering information, and the DOT is in charge of it, and we're going to be patient because we've got dialogues going on it right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Shaver?
certainly have a traffic problem, but what we really have is a mobility problem. We've had studies that have been done, several of them, the most recent in 2012, and it's interesting to hear some of these ideas coming to the surface now when, in fact, for the last 8 years, we've had these kinds of issues to address. So the right approach is to take the studies we already have, and not everything is determined by the Department of Transportation. We have a garage that's at 70% occupancy. So parking is part of the problem of signage, simple kinds of things. We have plenty of pilots that we could try based on the studies we have that would move us in the right direction. It's not enough to talk about them, and particularly just to talk about these in an election year when we've been looking at this problem for some time. So we have studies, we know what we can do, and there are some relatively straightforward, simple solutions coupled with the longer term activities that need to happen. But it is reality. We have a lot of traffic. And yes, it does, some of that traffic is tourist traffic. Much of it right now is coming from the pressure of the growth of St. Johns County. And we're happy that tourist revenue comes here. However, in terms of the city, the only return we get, besides the thriving business community, is a portion of sales tax. So it's a good thing that we have visitors. We love our home. We like to welcome them. But we need to manage our traffic and manage it, not just talk about it.
Shiver. Mayor Boles, your rebuttal.
Sure. One of the things that she mentioned was get your facts right, and that's exactly right. Let me remind you, if you don't know, our surface parking system is the number 2 revenue into our general fund. So that works really well. It does the exact job of keeping our property taxes low. But when you're talking about a study done in 2012 by the Department of Transportation, implementation takes years. If you've ever dealt with, and I know she hasn't, if you've ever dealt with the state, it takes years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next question, Ms. Shaver. Do you believe that the city should invest money in historic buildings in Lincolnville?
Lincolnville has a community redevelopment area already designated where funds are taken, basically designated for Lincolnville rehabilitation. That is well underway. There are lots of activities that are going on. A key concern of the CRA, and that was developed by the neighborhood, is to keep people in their homes. So what that means is directing money to fix up homes, clear title, make sure the neighborhood retains its character. In terms of the city investing in Lincolnville, the CRA is that investment mechanism. So I think that's the question that was asked. Lincolnville is an incredibly rich tapestry of homes. It's an amazing place. And if you have not walked Lincolnville and have not walked the Accord Freedom Trail, any of you, how many in this room have walked it? The rest of you go. It's an amazing place. You'll experience the history, not just of the buildings, but of the place itself.
Thank you. Mayor Boles?
Lincolnville is probably the neighborhood that's received the most attention from the city of St. Augustine in the last 10 years. The $10 million Riberia Street complete repaving, the rehabbing of the Willie Gallimore Center and Pool has brought vibrancy to that neighborhood that it hadn't seen in decades. I'm very proud to be a part of that. The CRA was created under my tutelage as mayor with the cooperation and agreement of all the city commissioners. On 1 vote out of 5, we all have to agree. And the CRA was formed, and what happens is as property taxes rise in Lincolnville, the increase in the property tax goes into the CRA fund to be used in that neighborhood. That's going to reap wonderful benefits. She's exactly right, and I'm proud to be one of the ones that voted for it. But as you start looking at preservation efforts, they're costly. I'm also very proud to know that we have a parking garage where all the revenue from it is devoted to tourism purposes. We can call preservation tourism purposes because that's why people come here. So after we get through with our 450th celebration, because the $2 increase in the parking garage revenue goes to the 450th, the following year, we're going to work on a preservation master plan because we'll have the money. Ideas are wonderful. Finding the money is the tough part. And we're finding it. And that takes a partnership of city staff, city commission, and all the residents that are around that say, let's see if we can do this thing. because we're listening to you. And you're the ones that are going to be here year after year, you and me. Been here with you for 47 years. I'm going to die here, so you can put that in the bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Shaver, your rebuttal? No rebuttal.
No.
Okay, let's move on then to the next question. And we begin with Mayor Boles. Can you comment on the accidental demolition of the 211-year-old bath junkie building and what measures should be in place to prevent such incidents?
Well, first, it's a tragedy of high order. And in our community, we value our historic structures. We work hard to maintain them, and we have protections on them. I'm not an engineer or contractor, and I know that the gentleman I know very well that lost his building is devastated about it because it's going to be very, very costly. It was done at a time where there was an attempt to stabilize the property. It had an architectural review, but I don't think it was sufficient. So the City Commission, Monday night, because it's a recent topic, decided that let's add on some additional requirements for foundation review. We have the technology now. You might not have had it 20 years ago. We have it now to check out the foundations of these historic structures, especially, and I'm not admitting any liability on behalf of the city, but especially when we are aggressively redoing streets and going into the ground. If we're near a historic building, I think we need some more information about what the foundations are like, because that was obviously the problem with this one, having foundations on two sides, but none on the other two. So that's a cautionary step that I think we can take. We can take it prudently, and have already done so.
Thank you, Mayor Boles. Ms. Shaver?
I don't think there's anyone in this room who has seen that building who doesn't get a really bad feeling in the pit of their stomach. It's very hard for me to imagine that there is another 200-year-old structure anywhere in the country where what happened here would have happened. Historic buildings are quite rare. Something that's been around 200 years. If you went to look at that building, as I did, and I know many of you probably did, I fixated on the beam that was clearly carved by hand 200 years ago. Protection of properties like this, obviously, there was a person who owned the building. I don't think anyone owns a building that's 200 years old. It's part of who we are, it's part of the fabric of this place and our country. So I would suggest, and I already have, that we look at other cities where historic properties exist and understand how they are protected in the course of any kind of construction, how they are assessed. None of this is difficult to do. We really didn't take care of that building, and I say we collectively. And we need to make sure in the future that we do it in the best of all possible ways and learn from places that do.
Ms. Shaver? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. One of the things that I guess nobody's told you is that building was special because most 200-year-old structures were institutional that were built better than the average home. This was a small house. It was modest. It was built with modest foundations and modest surroundings. And so they have gone the way of most buildings of that era. What we have is 200 buildings throughout the country are the ones that were solid built. And so that makes additional tragedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Shaver, do you have any plans to further reduce the crime rate in St. Augustine?
I would rather answer the question in terms of ordinance enforcement. Because in terms of crime rate, we really are not highly challenged that I'm aware of. No one has brought that up to me as an issue. What has been brought up is the issue of code enforcement. We have a lot of laws on the books and they're complaint driven. So that means that you have very uneven interpretations of what happens, whether it's a sign ordinance or quite frankly, whether it's some, undoubtedly, the college students who are not in this room having a great time on a Saturday night and throwing a few beer bottles around. So to me, the question really is how do you, examining all our codes, making sure they make sense, making sure they're consistent, and making sure they're enforced appropriately.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Well, the crime rate is not a big issue here until it happens to you. One of the things that we're very concerned with in the city is lighting. Lighting does more to prevent crime than any other thing that we've discovered yet. So all of the reconstruction we're doing downtown, we've added additional lighting to every one of those streets. Because these narrow streets provide some dark areas. So additional lighting is going to be one of the best things that we can do. And it's a priority. We want to keep layering that in whenever we do redo a street. It is more and appropriate lighting. We do enjoy a low crime rate because of our visitor population. We have a much bigger police force than we'd have for a town with 14,000 people in it. But we have to because we have close to 7 million visitors at last count. So that makes me feel a lot safer. Now we have lots and lots of laws on the book, and we're glad for them. And we're going to keep using the revenue we get from the non-property tax stream. Because keep in mind, property tax rates for single-family homeowners constitute $2.5 million of our $56 million budget. That's my home, my mother's home, your home. Another $6.5 million for all other residential uses. So commercial property pays the lion's share of property tax and gets back less per dollar than we do as residents. And I want to keep it that way. I like the garbage picked up twice. And so it all goes hand in hand. Keeping our revenue low from the property taxes payers, the residents, keeping our income high from the visitor population wherever we can, keeping our police force as paid as well as a small town can pay them, and we're going to keep pushing it, because if you ever stop, it'll catch up to you. So we keep year after year pushing that out, making sure we have good trained officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you like to rebuttal? We'll move on. Mayor Boles, do you believe that the post office downtown is the best location for citizens of St. Augustine?
I don't think the post office downtown is the best location for the post office. Senator Micah tried to arrange for the post office to move from downtown while leaving a downtown outpost, so to speak. Keep the boxes, keep drop off, keep a person. We were even looking at putting it in City Hall. Because I like a downtown presence at the post office. I have an office downtown I like to use. People like to walk to the post office. That post office is a nightmare. And it clogs up and keeps an area that's the entryway into one of our most sacred, I guess you can call it, oldest neighborhoods, Lincolnville. That could be a much better entry corridor through there if we could do something with the post office. But they are a pill to deal with. If they're going to move, I sat there and watched the man from Atlanta say, if we're going to move, we've got to be able to do it turnkey and not spend a dime. That's not possible. But as Senator Micah said, they're a whole different animal over there at the Postal Service. That deal fell through. The owner of the mall, Ponce de Leon Mall, was going to build them an out parcel, build them a building to come in and use. But they couldn't do it without money to move because they had to have a zero impact. There's not a whole lot you can do about that, so that ended that conversation. Who knows what's going to happen to it? It's been sold once and taken back and sold again, but the post office is there. They've got a long-term lease. And so we may be suffering that post office for a while. But no, I don't think it ought to be there. And I'd like to have a small post office downtown for us. Get rid of the central post office for the whole area. That's ridiculous for it to be right downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Boles. Ms. Shaver.
I actually think Mayor Boles is exactly right. I think that his statement of the history of what happened is absolutely accurate, tough to deal with. Would love to have that property used in a different way. It clearly could, it would be lovely to have it on the tax rolls and have it be something that's both attractive and producing revenue and have a convenient small post office. but we're dealing with lots of different entities, and they probably aren't going to play nice in the sandbox.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Rebuttal, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, no, you don't rebut something that's right.
Okay, then. Let's move on to Ms. Schaefer. And what is your stance on the businesses going under due to the construction downtown? Are there any plans to help them financially rebuild that you perceive would work?
This is one of these really tough problems. We decided to spend $3.3 million on upgrading Spanish and Hippolyta Street as part of the 450th. Is it a good idea? Hard to say. Will it be pretty when it's done? Probably. In terms of the impact on businesses, one of the difficulties of the equation is that the people who own the building, the people who own those buildings do not operate the businesses. So the impact is being felt by small businesses, some businesses that have been here for a long time, and they're really, really hurting. Most recently, 2 weeks ago, we had a Spanish Hippolyta cash mob where a number of us came to support those businesses, to spend money, to really make people aware that you can still get to those businesses and spend money. And there's been a suggestion that that gets repeated so people can remember they're there, because one of the difficulties is that they don't think you can get there, and it really isn't that hard. So this is a city decision that's impacting private businesses in a really negative way, and I'm not sure what you do with that except support the businesses, and I would encourage all of you who are here to do that, to go support those businesses as best you can. Just one observation I made down there is that often when you have that kind of construction, particularly in other cities, what you do is, instead of the chain link fence, which makes it look like you really can't go down there, you do something artistic in terms of wrapping it, in terms of lighting, in terms of things that draw people down that space. Something like that is a modest approach that might help, but it's a tough one.
Thank you, Michelle. Mayor Boles?
Sure. Well, the statement that the city's spending $3.3 million to redo the infrastructure on those streets in downtown is not quite accurate. I do agree that we should go down and patronize them and be part of that. I'd like to, but what she forgets is the public-private partnership of this. This is a unique project where the landowners in that area agreed to provide $750,000 to go with the city's money to make that happen, and make it happen before 2015. They brought it to the city. We said, great, this is unique, creative, and we're going to walk down the road with you. Did they know it was going to be tough? Absolutely. And I can't tell you how proud I am of the people that helped initiate this project, are the ones that are having the toughest time. They knew it, they're working through it, and I really appreciate their cooperation, because they know that the plan they invested $750,000 in is going to make that area incredible. Just incredible. Go down and look at the part of Hippolyta Street that's finished already. It's incredible. Now, does this need to be done? Absolutely. Those streets were the ones impacted the least over the last decade. They've been need to be done for a long time. And if you're going to go ahead and tear the street up and fix all the pipes and put the utilities underground and do everything you can with that, let's do it all at one time. And they are partners with the city. That is so creative. You're not going to find that in many places. And I'm very proud of it and proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Boles. Ms. Schaefer?
Just a quick fact check. Of the $3.3 million, I want to make sure that I'm clear. There was $750,000 of that was lent to the people who own the buildings, so that was not cash out, but it's definitely money that's going to come back over a very, very long period of time. The other fact check is that this street was not at the top of any priority list to be redone. There was a priority list. This one was accelerated specifically for the 450th, and specifically remembered the owners, not necessarily business operators.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. question. We got a great list of questions, so I'm going to go with this one right here, and we're going to start with Mayor Boles. Correct, yes. Mayor Boles, do you support a food and beverage tax even if it doesn't apply to residents?
Well, not only did I support it, I initiated it and brought it up to the commission. It's one of our strategic plans, and we've all experienced places where we go and buy food and pay for meals and have a beer when we're on vacation. Williamsburg has a very successful food and beverage tax. No reason why we can't. Right now, the only way the visiting population participates is through our bed tax. You have to spend the night for that revenue to come to the county. We can do this for the city of St. Augustine, I'm told. It's still got to go through the legislature. And to get something through the legislature, you need partners there. You need people that you build relationships with over the years. And once we do that, I don't think there's a single visitor to this city that's going to notice an extra nickel on their beer. But it'll make a big difference for us. And one more way that our visiting population can partner with us in keeping this larger police force than we need, our own fire department, street work, it's unlimited in how we use it. That's the kind of thing that I will support, we'll fight for, we'll go to Tallahassee and argue for, and make part of our whole pricing structure. And exempting St. Johns County residents is a good way to do it. Thank you.
Mayor Boles, thank you. Ms. Shaver.
Let's talk a little bit about the Florida statute that covers food and beverage taxes. There is a statute on the books that is a county option. Let's talk about where that money goes. That money by statute is mandated, if it's the 2% tax, to go to increase tourism. So that really doesn't address the issues of offsetting the costs of tourists. The 1% portion of what is on the books goes to support homeless shelters and domestic abuse shelters. That is a laudable goal. But remember, what we're talking about is gaining money from tourists to offset our cost of serving them. 10 years ago, we knew that cost was $1.6 million. If you figure the cost of money doubles, it's 3.2 at this point. We know that, and we don't have a revenue stream to offset that. So if the goal of a food and beverage tax is to offset the revenue stream, we are kind of constrained by the fact that there is a statute on the books that is Florida law, and that's what we'd have to pay attention to. Williamsburg, as a comparison, is probably not the best comparison. Williamsburg is run by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that's a private foundation, so its opportunities to tax and operate are quite different, and it's in a different state. Do I think we should do more to get revenue from tourism that we can use to offset these costs? Absolutely, and there are half a dozen different ways to think about doing that. Whether it's a $1 fee on a particular, let's say the trolleys that was discussed many years ago, there are probably half a dozen different ways in which at the margin we could add costs to services that tourists would use. They're amazingly price insensitive at the margin. But a food and beverage tax, I do think we're constrained by the law on the books in Florida.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. And Mr. Mayor?
Sure. She is referring to the current law. If you know anything about law, we have a legislature that meets every year and passes new laws. This is new legislation we're talking about, not working off the current bed tax legislation that we've had to wrestle with for a while. So this is new legislation. This can be targeted at St. Augustine only, but if the county wants to jump on with us, great. They're wonderful partners. It's a bigger set of lobbyists to get this through. No reason not to go after it. It's fruit on the vine that needs to be collected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Boles. Okay, now we're going to go to the audience questions. We have 10 minutes, I believe, for this.
Ms.
And
Baer, is
we're
it
gonna
the
questions.
same 2 minutes in rebuttal, or just straight vote?
I thought it was 30 seconds.
Just 30 seconds.
30 seconds for each question. Okay. Okay. We will pull a Flagler student question first.
It might be a question.
Okay, and we're going to, we start with the incumbent first again?
Yes.
Okay, we will begin with Mayor Boles. What will you do to help promote LGBT rights in St. Augustine?
Sure. My daughter and her partner, Simone, she goes to the University of Florida Law School. She's worked with Equality Florida and has been a part of the drafting of the Atlantic Beach, adding some Miami and Alachua County language to it. I brought that ordinance to the city of St. Augustine, and they have taken it, our city attorney, and is going to move it toward discussion on October 27th. Our human rights ordinance that we have in place omits and leaves out a lot of stuff. Atlantic Beach went through a 9-month process, and I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel, so I think we'll pass it before.
Thank you, Mayor. And Ms. Shaver.
Again, you're right, let's do it. We need a human rights ordinance, we need it to be welcoming to everyone in the city, regardless of what their sexual preference is, regardless of their gender identity. It goes beyond an ordinance. It goes to welcoming, to recognizing, to supporting people of any lifestyle, any color, any age, and that's what we need to do. So it's cultural as well as an ordinance, and we can do that, and we should.
Thank you. Now we go to the public questions. Isabel Dixon, would you like to come forward? Thank you. We have a microphone right here.
Well, that's all. What I'd like to ask is, you keep referring to the revenue that we get from, as you refer to, visitors. I don't see any of that. I just see a lot of congestion and folks downtown, which is great, but I don't see any revenue.
Sure. Thank you, Isabel. Well, you won't see any, but what you will see is a capped millage rate the last 5 years on your home property tax. I assume you own your home. That'll stay low because we get our revenue from other sources. We get it from the mooring field, we get it from the marina, we get it from our parking system, our surface parking system, we get it from our parking garage, where 97% of the people that pay that are tourists, and we get it from our share of the sales tax. So you're not going to see it because there's not a way for it to come back into your pocket except as a savings on your property tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Shaver.
We definitely get revenue from all of the areas that Joe mentioned. In terms of direct revenue that we get from tourists, I tend to focus on the sales tax number because people talk about it a lot. It's important to remember that that sales tax goes to Tallahassee, gets put in a pot, whether it's Miami or whether it's from Tampa, and then gets a portion back to us based on our population. So that means that's really capped. So the more sales tax we wind up, it's not a direct. So.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. All right, so now we go back to Flagler. Leslie Keys. Leslie Keys, would you like to step forward?
I'll defer to the rest of the group. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Or go ahead and we'll take another student. This is from Matilda Murphy. Does St. Augustine recycle? Should St. Augustine recycle?
Oh yeah, we do. We've got a big green, a couple of them at my house where we put all our recyclables and it gets picked up on Friday. We've just initiated another push downtown for our commercial businesses. We just had a question last night from one commissioner, how can we make it easier for them? Because if we make it easier for the commercial entities who generate 10 times what we do at our house, we'll be more successful. We've also tried some pilot programs where we've changed the size of the, I think we tried it in Melinda Constay's neighborhood. See that work, but absolutely we do.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Shaver.
We do well, we can do better. And particularly one of the challenges with recycling is commercial entities and small multifamily units often are challenged with that. We can do better. I'm involved with a wonderful group that's focused on all the environmental aspects and we can definitely do better. The focus, particularly for us here, we're really on an island. And if you think about living on an island, you need to be exceptionally careful about how you use and remove anything from an island.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Take one from the public. Brian Donnelly.
Can you hear me okay here? There have been any number of studies that are economic studies that indicate that the tourist business removes the bulk of the profit, so that the jobs that are generated from tourism are oftentimes significantly among those of the lowest paying. What about opportunities for other businesses? As significant as tourism is here, is this the key to the economic, what is the vision that either of you may have for other businesses being brought in?
Sure. Well, like I told you, when I was a kid, you had to leave here to go to college. Having college here, having a university here is a wonderful way. You stop and let's take the restaurants. The gas, the ice plant, Yardbirds, they all involve college graduates from Flagler that stayed here. So there's not service jobs that are, tips in $1.50 an hour. So encouraging the heritage tourist that is also after a better product is what we need to do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shaver?
I think your question was what are alternatives to revenues, alternative for jobs for other than tourism. Tourism is a key economic engine. One of the things that I've been exploring with a number of people is what kind of development do we want in the city? And it would be infill development. So looking at the changing working patterns, looking at technology-based businesses, looking at structures that create both affordable housing and retail office technology incubators is really something we need to look at seriously. If you think about Riberia Street, it's a perfect opportunity for that kind of thing.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Now we'll go back to the college students. Flagler. And we have Victoria Sun-Bertrand. Sun-Bertrand. Thank you.
This might be a little bit of a loaded question, but how do you plan to balance expansion of the city, tourism, and Flagler College with the interests of people who have been living in Lincolnville for decades, our large population of veterans, and at the same time promoting the student involvement?
Run that by me.
Yeah, can you mind slowing down a little bit for the rest of us? All right, energetic as you are.
Right. How do you plan to balance expansion of the city, the expansion of tourism, and the expansion of Flagler College with the interests of people who have been living in Lincolnville for decades, or the interests of veterans and students in the community?
Well, for starters, the city's not expanding. I mean, we're 14 square miles, and unless we annex something, we're not expanding, so let's set that aside. The expansion of the college is going to have to be a partnership and dialogue, and that town and gown initiative, I think, is going to work well, because, you've got to talk to each other. You can't just point the finger in the street and say, you're doing wrong, I want you to stop. You got to talk to each other. Students are part of that, but I try to tell people that not every student lives in their neighborhood, and not every young person is a student. So keep that in mind, neighbors.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shaver.
I think what you're asking is how do you protect the livability of the places that exist? And in many ways, that's a huge part of this campaign. And one of the key issues that has surfaced is zoning and how we manage neighborhoods and how we make sure they're livable and how the uses that are permitted in neighborhoods are ones that are consistent with what makes sense. So that's a key initiative, updating our zoning. Our comp plan hasn't been done in a quarter of a century. Zoning has been talked about at every forum. So that to me is, I think, the answer to your question.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. And now we have to end our questioning for the mayoral candidates. I want to thank them so much. And